Right. Welcome to a conversation about numbers in the week of Inspirational Math. Thank you for joining me. Who are you and what do you do?
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Val Sweeting. I'm a curler, a mom, and I also work full-time for the federal government.
Great. Well, as a curler, I imagine there could be lots of different things that you're involved in. Can you share some of the more recent tournaments that you've played in?
Yeah, most recently we competed in the Scotties Tournament of Hearts, which is the Canadian Women's National Championship. And we were supposed to have a few other events in January, but unfortunately they all got canceled because of COVID. But we were really fortunate that the national championship ran and we came out on top.
Frustrating that things got a little bit canceled, but I'd like to share a bit of a clip from the most recent tournament, and I'd like you to think of the numbers that you're hearing and what they mean, because in curling, sometimes the numbers aren't always intuitive for people who don't know curling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Numbers have come up slightly
I think
for
so.
Kendra
It's
Lilly.
just like
As long as our shooter stays
back
on top
12
of that
weight.
one. Yeah. Yeah, my only thought is like kind of splitting the wide yellow. But either
Okay.
or. Yeah. Back 12.
Just kind of tap it to here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just stay high or even roll off of it. It's good. Okay. So
The goal
I'd
is to
actually
get
like to
one
get
of
to
those
this
yellows out of the
one.
way, so then you can chase
Kick
the red.
that here, so then when
Okay.
if we tried to remove it, it doesn't jam there.
yeah. So a little high.
Yeah.
Okay.
You like right there?
Yeah. Back
Should be
12.
close. Yep. Good throw here. You got it, Val. Like a 14-ish. For back 12, probably a 14.5. Yeah.
So
There we're talking
Jeff
about
Howard
the
has
time that
operating event this week. You get a plus, out-curling your opponent by 5 percentage points or more. Every game she's been the best. The last time she wasn't the best was at the trials in Saskatoon,
yeah.
and the opposing player who out-curled her, Kendra Lilly.
Good.
Okay, well, I heard a lot of things being thrown around in there, and the 14.5, 5 percentage points. What are some numbers in there that stood out to you, and what do they sort of mean?
Yeah, we do use a lot of numbers in curling, and the first one that stood out would be the 14 that we talked about before I threw, and that's kind of just a measure of how hard to throw it. So that would be the time in seconds from the first hog line, so that first thicker line, to the other line at the other end, and it just kind of gives a speed because they're different all over the sheet. So that particular path, I wasn't too sure. So I checked in with the brushers. So yeah, that would be 14.5 seconds that we were looking for speed. And another number that they talked about there was a plus 11. And anytime you out curl your opposing position by 5% or more, you get a plus 1. So throughout the 11 games that we had played, I had outplayed my opposing third by at least 5%. And in that game at that time, I was 5% ahead of the other third.
So is that
stats?
So is that the successful throws out of the total throws? Just a straight calculation for those?
Yeah. For every shot that we play, it's scored out of 5. So if you make it fully, you'll get a 5 out of 5. If you miss completely, you'll get a 0. And then there's kind of a range from there as to whether you get a 1, 2, 3, or 4.
Cool. That's an interesting scoring system. And you said the 14 is sort of that measure of time to determine distance. What are some other numbers that you sort of see? What is the shortest time you'll often sort of be seeing as that measure of distance? Because 14 is towards the back, you said?
Yeah, that's kind of the long time, we so to speak, like all the way down the sheet. Some other times you might hear from other teams are a shorter number, like a 4.5 one kind of number, and that would be from the very first line that we cross while we're throwing, the back line, to the first hog line. And that there's a lot of variables, but it can give the brushers an idea of how far that rock is going to go based on the short time that we get.
It's an interesting mindset because when I think about the distance from Edmonton to Calgary, I'm thinking kilometers or miles. And if I'm in curling and I want to think about how far I want to throw, I'm thinking more about time than maybe that distance. And it's an interesting mindset shift. In terms of the rock placement, again, I often hear 4 foot and words like that. What do those foots mean in terms of kind of rock placement around the circles?
Yeah, there's the biggest one would be the 12 foot, and then that would be the total distance across like the size of the circle. And then it also goes down. So the red circle from the outermost points is 12 feet.
Okay.
And then the white one is the 8 foot. So that would measure 8 feet from the outer spots. And then the 4 foot is the blue one in the middle, and that would measure 4 feet. And then the button is the smallest one that have the hearts on there, and they vary in sizes. Sometimes they're 1 feet, and sometimes they're bigger or smaller, depending on the curling club.
I was always never sure at the beginning if is it a 4 foot radius or a 4 foot diameter, but it is, for the outside edges, it is that outside edge of the larger circle is that diameter, and that's the language you use? Yeah.
It would be from the outermost part of that particular color would be what it's referring to.
And as we're talking about the week of inspirational math and numbers, are there any numbers that are sort of external to rock placement and timing, or does that sort of encapsulate numbers in curling?
Yeah, another way that we use numbers would be to refer to a certain zone in the sheet. So sometimes you might hear us yell out a 1 or a 2, and that just kind of is a quicker way to communicate back and forth with the skip as to how far we think that rock is going, to allow our skip to tell us whether to sweep or not. And some other teams even break it down more in the house. So instead of saying top 4, they might be like a 6. So some teams use it, some don't, but it's just another way of kind of breaking down those zones and allow for faster communication back and forth down the sheet.
In math, we have the coordinate plane, and we have a grid to organize numbers in a way. And so it sounds very much like there's a bit of a grid or a map to the different regions for the sheet. And the last question I might have is, in terms of the spinning of the rock, the rotations, is it typically a similar spin every throw, or do you sometimes want to spin more or less? Like how do you know how much to spin? Like there's rotations, right?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Ideally, you want it to be consistent, but it is quite challenging to get it consistent throughout the whole time, because the more that it's spinning down the sheet, the further the rock is going to travel. And it also affects the curl too. If it's not spinning as quickly, it tends to curl a little bit more. So something we have to pay attention to as well, because we're human. It's hard to throw it exactly the same every time. Yeah. So yeah, that definitely plays an important factor in how the rock travels down the sheet.
I imagine it becomes a bit intuitive with how you spin, and you've got that touch, but I'm sure one day you could map out the degrees per second or the rotation one day after our conversation.
Yeah.
But it sounds like there's a lot of numbers in math and in curling as well. And I'd like to sort of finish our conversation with last question. What are some of your highlights, or maybe a favorite moment from your curling experiences so far?
Some highlights would be, all the cool places that I've got to travel. So I've been to Japan and Scotland and some really cool places across Canada as well. in terms of events, we've been really fortunate to win the last 3 Scotties Tournament of Hearts, and so that would definitely be a highlight for us. And yeah,
I think those are some incredible moments to not just win, but also to win in different places and get to share those with families and friends and all the people that you that have supported you the whole way. Thank you so much for your time and the conversation, and it's fascinating to hear how much math is in curling.
yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was fun to chat about it.
Thanks, Val.